Oh yes, it's that time again. It's Bible reading with Wally, baby. We are in the book of Samuel, and I've got a real humdinger prepared for you. Let's get into it. Watch this. This is going to be a one-page open. There's no markers or anything. I know it's YouTube, but I'm not a con man. Here we go. Watch this. One page open. Huge. It was 1 Samuel, but it was chapter 12. And I was going for chapter 7, 8. It was within 4 chapters. That's not bad, people. That's not bad.
Are you sure about that?
Okay, enough of the silliness. All right, so there's a lot of wacky, kooky stuff in this book, as I always say. But I think we're going to do the whole Bible once and then go back over it, and we'll talk about other things. So I know there's some crazy stuff that I'm not talking about, but this one is particularly interesting to me because, as I always say, these are things that I saw.
But I cannot see. I'm legally blind. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
When I was first reading the Bible honestly and first waking up, and questions that I had that I found out there was no satisfying answer to. And so yeah, that's why I choose the ones that I do. So in Samuel, you have the first instance of Israel asking for a king.
King me.
Son of a...
Now, when they ask for a king, how does God react? So let's just start with 1 Samuel chapter 8. The Israelites basically go to Samuel and they say, who's their judge, high priest guy, they say, hey, your sons are pieces of garbage. They have not walked in the way that you've set out for them. So we want to be like the other nations and have a king, because that would be better than your sons who would have, the succession over you, which are basically a king, but not quite a king. But they were going to be the ones that were the judges or the high priests in Israel. But they were good for nothing men, as the Bible says. Well, God gets
angry
at them for asking for a king instead of the good-for-nothing sons of Samuel. And he basically goes and tells them that all of these bad things are going to happen. He's going to, your sons he will take and put them as, his in his chariots. He will appoint himself chief over the thousands. Your daughters he will take for ointment mixers and cooks. Your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves, the best ones he will take and actually give to his servants.
Right the horses! And we
rode off on the women.
plundered, pruned the
hedges
of many small villages. Who the hell are you?
And your fields of seed and your vineyard he will take the 10th. And on and on and on and on and on. And then if something bad happens to you and you cry out to Jehovah, he will not answer you in that day. Basically, God disapproved of them asking for a king. But he told Samuel, go along with it anyway. Now, the interesting part when I was reading this in my waking up sort of zone phase was, didn't God promise them that they would have kings? Because I'll just take you back in case you aren't caught up with the lore, but basically I went with a notebook, and as I was reading the Bible, I was just making notes of everything that was happening. And I guess, tactile memory, it's pretty strong. So I was like, wait, I thought I remember back in Deuteronomy, God actually giving them commands in the Mosaic Law for a king. So why would God be upset that they wanted to institute the whole program? This is not a clean page turn. Wow, that was awful. So if you go to Deuteronomy 17, yeah, you have a bunch of verses that talk about, I guess starting in 14. I'm just speed running it here, so I'm not reading it verbatim, so I'm not putting it on screen. But let me set a king over myself like all the nations, usually without fail. Yeah, he gives rules, basically, of what the king would do and how he would have to write this book of the law and keep a copy of it. Basically, in the Mosaic Law itself, he had given rules for a king. And then, if you go back even farther, when Israel, the guy named Israel, he was also promised that his offspring would become kings. You go back even farther to Abraham. His offspring was promised that there would be kings that would rule in their lands. I don't know the exact verses. I think I actually wrote it down because I wanted to be not how I normally am. Genesis 35 and Genesis 17. If you read through those, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So God had, for the last, I don't know the exact timeline, but let's just say between 500 and 1,000 years, had basically prophesied and given instructions that there would be kings in Israel. Now the time has come when the Israelites are like, "Hey, do you think we could get that king that you said we could?" And God goes off the rails and basically says all of these horrible things and how bad it is that they've rejected him after he had already promised them a king. And then immediately, once, he goes on his little harangue and is like, "Oh, I can't believe you've rejected me. Oh, you're so bad." Then he's like, "Okay, well, I'm going to go and do this elaborate thing, and I'm going to bless this person and make sure he has my spirit, and my spirit's going to become operative on him." And that's what happens in Samuel chapter 9, basically, when the selection process begins. But I mentioned this to my brother.
Hold on to your butts.
When we were out walking door to door. So we're out there on a Saturday morning and, talking about our normal stuff that we would talk about, Smash Brothers tech or basketball or a new tennis racket or soccer boots that are coming out. I don't know. Anyway. And I tried to just slide this into the conversation. And I mentioned that in my Bible reading, I had kind of found this weird discrepancy. And he immediately went to the JW library thing and found this excerpt, from the Insight book, if I'm not mistaken. And it was in the paragraph is called "A Human King Requested." It's on volume 2, page 163. It says, "Nearly 400 years from the time of the Exodus, and over 800 years from the making of God's covenant with Abraham, the Israelites requested a human king to lead them.
Water world.
Even as the other nations had human monarchs. Their request constituted a rejection of Jehovah's own kingship over them. True, the people properly expected a kingdom to be established by God in harmony with his promise to Abraham and to Jacob, already cited. They had further basis for such hope in Jacob's deathbed prophecy concerning Judah, in Jehovah's words to Israel after the Exodus, in the terms of the law covenant, and even in part of the message God caused the prophet Balaam to speak.
Water would be nice.
Samuel's faithful mother Hannah expressed this hope in prayer. Nevertheless, Jehovah had not fully revealed his sacred secret regarding the kingdom and had not indicated when his due time for its establishment would arrive, nor what the structure and composition of that government would be, whether it would be earthly or heavenly. It was therefore presumptuous on the part of the people now to demand a human king. So I find this explanation particularly weak because it's shoehorning a discrepancy in the biblical timeline. So whoever composed the Bible and, eventually put everything together, they made a mistake. They shouldn't have had this story in there, as chronologically taking place after God had said all these other things. They should have left it out. Now, why is the story in there? It's because they always need to have a story in order to tell of perhaps an actual historical event. It's how oral histories went, and those oral histories would get changed down through the centuries, and this is what you'd be left with: confusion and just things that don't agree. So, when my brother pulled this up and said, oh, okay, well, here's the explanation, so that's cool, I was like, but that doesn't work. He's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, well, even if that is your explanation, then God just seems like a goon and a loon. Because imagine someone has a kid and they tell them when they're 10 years old or 12 years old, hey, when you are able to drive a car, I'm going to buy you a car and I'm going to teach you how to operate it. And then the kid turns 16 and the kid's like, hey, do you think, we can start my driving lessons and maybe I can get a car? The parent flies off the rails and say, well, why are you rejecting me? Oh, so you apparently hate my driving all of the sudden? And the kid's standing there like, well, I thought you said that you'd get me a car. That's all I was, and show me how to drive. That's all I was saying. Oh, so you must have wanted to reject me so you can be like all those other kids out there, driving around with their cars. Well, you know what? Fine. I'm going to get you a car, but it's going to be terrible. And you're going to get tickets and you're going to get into accidents. That is the equivalent of what God does here. And I'm sorry, you cannot convince me otherwise, because anyone that prophesies and says, and has all of this foreknowledge, apparently, according to the doctrine. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to give you kings and your offspring, they're going to become kings. Even in his law book, sets out rules for the kings. And then when the children, that's all Israel is, meant to be, ask for, oh, okay, well, can we get our king now? And the reason they were asking for it was because the judge, Samuel, or judge, high priest, I forget what it is exactly. It doesn't matter. The seer, I think it was technically a seer. The line of succession would have gone to his sons, but they were good for nothing. So well, we don't want to be, led by good for nothing people. So, hey, maybe it's a good time for us to get our king now. Nope, God goes crazy and basically denounces them and gets really upset by the fact that they're asking for a human king.
What are you trying to get crazy with, Jose? Don't you know I'm loco?
Well, thank you so much for joining me for another Bible reading with Wally. Next time we will tackle 2 Samuel and see what kind of kooky, quirky things that we can find. But first, before you go, if I flip this bottle and it lands upright on top of my Bible, you must subscribe to the channel. So here we go. If I do it within 3 tries... See, that was 2. That was the warm-up. Now I got it cooking. Well, if I do it within 5 tries, 4 tries. Now you have to subscribe to the channel, baby.